How's it going, everybody? And welcome to episode 286 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode, we're going deeper into a topic that we have covered in the past, and it's the creation and maintenance of a wildlife pond. So, we have covered this before, as I say, mentioned a few weeks ago with Brian and Jilly from Wild Acres. We spoke about it then. We've spoke about it previously in the creation of a garden pond. But this week, I have Ashley Dowling, who's an expert in ponds. She has a business all around the creation of wildlife ponds and ponds in general, and anything really to do with water in your garden. She's also an expert at creating habitats for the likes of hedgehogs and so on in your garden. And yeah, she maintains and creates from scratch. So we're going to look at the creation of a wildlife pond, but also how you don't just dig a hole in the ground, fill it with water, and call that a wildlife pond, that there is the sort of connection to your garden that you need to do in order to ensure that it does what it's supposed to do there. So we're going to go deep dive on this today. So Ashley, you're very, very welcome to Master My Garden podcast.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here to chat
Yeah,
about my favorite topic of all time.
yeah, and we've been speaking off air, so it's definitely your favorite topic.
Yeah.
So I suppose, as I say, we've covered this a little bit in the past, and but not gone into it in a deep way. And I think as we were chatting off air, it's clear that wildlife ponds, we'll talk about their benefits in a minute, and they're hugely beneficial within the garden and ponds in general. But as you said, it's about connecting them to, I suppose, connecting them to the garden as opposed to just dropping them there and hoping that something finds it. So I suppose, firstly, how did you get into ponds, or where has this
Um, well, that's a long story. So I actually studied agricultural science because I wanted to be a farmer. I still do. And but I was disillusioned by what as advisors you would have to tell farmers to do with the whole chemical thing.
Mhm.
So I had dug my first pond, I think, when I was 13, and continued to do so. And then I thought I'd go into horticulture, and I kind of did branch into horticulture and landscaping. And then I just loved ponds so much that I started doing maintenance for garden ponds for the lovely little old ladies around my area. And it just went from there. And it has only really become very popular, I'd say, in the last 5 years. So it's super nice for me now to not have to try to encourage people to put in a pond or to add a bee garden or to take out all the weeds. Like, people are more embracing of things being natural, which is amazing. So and then people are also kind of less squeamish and more interested in the creepy crawlies and
Yeah,
stuff like that. So yeah, it just went from there naturally. And I also kind of have a big liking for stonework, and working with natural materials, usually granite.
hmm,
So I wouldn't really be into the very hard, clean lines. I have done it occasionally, but yeah, and I suppose sound in the garden and trying as hard as possible, no matter how small the site is, to put in as many different types of habitats in a small area so that you attract as much diversity as possible. So yeah,
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's like, there's definitely, as we said, there's going to be a lot of things we will end up talking about here, because you've mentioned habitats there and the creation of habitats and, natural products. And I suppose the more we move away from those natural products, natural woods, natural stones, stone walls, and we move towards, the latest phase is the porcelain tile, the outdoor porcelain
Yeah,
tile, and
trends.
yeah, trends. Yeah,
Yeah,
the more we move towards them, the less habitat space there is left for various creatures within the gardens.
yeah,
So a wildlife pond is a brilliant thing to add in, I suppose, so long as you're going to get the establishment right and then the ongoing maintenance right. So
yeah,
let's go right back to the start on this one. And as I say, we've covered creating of a pond before. I've covered, the measuring of the liner, the
oh
types of
yeah,
liner and all that type of thing. But let's
yeah,
say we have our hole dug in the ground. We're creating a wildlife pond here, and we
yeah,
have our liner gone in. Let's start from scratch here. Maybe even talk about the excavation piece where we're taking out layers. And I know you've some thoughts on
yeah.
that around the maintenance, ongoing maintenance, and so on. So.
Yeah, so I find so engineering it out in your head and where it's to be is really important. So generally, sun is important for everything. Sort of no trees locally, and I always kind of marry a pond into a flower bed, so that if there is a creature that wants to get there, like frogs, that they're not going to be predated by something from the sky, like magpies, or hedgehogs can go and drink peacefully and all those things. So the situation of the pond is really important. And once you've decided where it's going, what I generally do is I dig in layers, and I have my layers depending on the plants that I want to grow. So that's a personal choice. But obviously, with all gardening, the more diversity of plants, native plants now, the better. So I actually do dig a pond. It looks similar to what a swimming pool would be, except the gradient on the walls is a bit bigger. And I also make the pond. So pretend you have a pond that's sort of 2 meters long. I would also add extra that I measure beyond where the water edge will be, because then you don't the thing that I really hate is being having the liner visible. So if
Hmm.
you manage to bed in the surround of your liner into lovely stone, what happens, and you bridge the soil from the water with the stone, is you get a little kind of slushy, marshy area behind the stone, which you
Yeah.
can then fill with other plants. So really what you're trying to do is make as many habitats as possible, because in the wild, even though yes, some of them would be kind of a gently sloping dish, that's not practical going forward. So you have to think 5 years ahead, when you might have to get in there in waders and clean it out. So the natural process of the pond would be that everything degrades and
Hmm.
falls to the bottom, creates this lovely sludge, which usually stays settled unless you have fish. And I wouldn't recommend, especially having koi or any kind of fish really in a pond, because they disrupt the balance and they eat the insects and they churn up the nutrients, and you'll always be fighting algae and dirty water. So
And they
the
create too
structure
much
is
nutrients as
important.
well, don't they?
Pardon?
They, like the likes of koi, they create too much
They
waste in the
do.
pond as well,
Yeah.
and
It's
and
an
that,
uphill battle.
yeah, yeah, and that drives up
Um,
the nutrients, which leads to more algae and an imbalance. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and they have their mouth is on the bottom of their head with the barb, so they're designed to shuffle around at the bottom
Okay.
and keep the nutrients kind of liberated into the water, which is exactly what you don't want.
Hmm.
So yeah, the structure and also safety. So if you dig a pond that's like a dish like this, it's really unsafe, because you'll end up sliding into the middle of it. And even thinking forward, I don't know if you've ever seen reservoirs that have been built with really steep sides and they get a puncture. What ends up happening is that everything in the middle, all the wildlife falls in and it dies.
Okay.
So I'm even thinking that far ahead, that if something happens in the future, I'm not going to be responsible for stuff dying. So I want to have all of my angles between the layers, that something could escape if it wants to, or that there's easy access in and out. And then, of
Hmm.
course, adding logs is important, because our species of decomposing kind of log or wood insects is really in decline, especially the aquatic beetles.
Okay.
So adding a log as a bridge, even for just the teeny tiny creepy crawlies, like it doesn't have to be a tree,
Hmm.
is important. And the small little froglets can get in and out like that. And it's adding a different chemistry to the water too. Like decomposition isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a
Okay.
natural process.
And these little logs now you're talking about actually in the water or
Yeah.
in the water. Okay.
Yeah, so dipping in and out. So
Okay.
quite a lot of the time I'd leave a gap where I usually put stones around the margin, like
Yeah.
heavy natural granite stones. And then I might have a log that will kind of fit in between one and be going into the water, so that algae form on all of these surfaces. And if you look really closely, you'll see tadpoles and even the water kind of woodlouse guy. They're all doing jobs, and
Hmm.
in nature there would be tree boughs and
Yeah.
sticks,
Like,
and yeah,
yeah.
so just trying to, if you imagine, I always think that if you're trying to create something, imagine that you're one of the creatures in the pond or all of them, and try to
Hmm.
recreate the home that they would like to have. That's how
Uh-huh.
I do it. I'm in the mind of a tadpole going, okay, what would my ideal home be? That's
And
how I do it.
yeah, so you're looking for these layers
Yeah.
and these layers and these changes of texture with the shallow area, the stone out into the very soft marshy clay.
Yes.
And these are all habitats for, I guess, different creatures, but also suitable areas for different plants,
Yeah,
as you
and
would have.
different temperatures as well,
Okay,
and
yeah,
different
different temperatures.
temperatures during the seasons.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the time what I do is even with the big granite, I'll add in different sizes of rocks all the way down to sand because there's lots of the caddisflies, they all use different things to make their homes again. And again, it's changing the water chemistry depending on what the substrate is. So all of and there's a lot of stuff that we don't know as well, remember. So
Hmm.
keeping things simple sometimes is easier, but the more complexity and the addition of, as you said, the textures and the plants that you add, the more likely there's something there that we don't even know about that you're helping.
Yeah, yeah,
So just mimicking a habitat in nature and obviously using as much as possible native plants,
yeah.
both beside and in the water. And having sort of a herbaceous border is totally fine, but stick in the odd what we would deem weed into it and allow it
Hmm.
to grow.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. So yeah, so as many as possible. And then another thing with the really small ponds, you might find that that'll heat up quite quickly and be a totally different type of habitat. So if you want it to be more uniform, you might have to put in a deeper area to keep the temperature consistent and get those nice convection currents going in the water so that
Hmm.
it maintains sort of a stable-ish temperature rather than if it's really shallow, it's fine, it's great for birds and um, a lot of sort of transient insects that are populating it in the summer months, but it mightn't be good for somebody else. So if you'd wanted both, say, you might create quite a big dish area, marginal area, and then a deep area. Like
Hmm.
anything is possible in nature.
Yeah, and obviously, like nature, if you have, for example, you have a little oak barrel that you want
Yeah.
to, if you're in a really small garden and you want to create a little wildlife pond in that, as we've seen on Gardener's World several times, they've created these
Yeah.
little ponds and so on. But what we're saying here now is that that'll be a totally different habitat to what you will have if you create a larger one with these different layers with a stable temperature and so
Yeah.
on. So just
And
be aware.
overwintering possibilities. But the barrel is great as well. The only thing I'd ever say about barrels or any of them, just giving it in and out and into and out of, because what I see actually a lot in the countryside are troughs with drowned bumblebees in them. I think a lot of creatures, if you had a garden and there was no water for miles around, which is quite possible, and you have a barrel, a lot of the time you're visiting insects just to drink, and if they fall in, they will drown. So always
Okay.
have some sort of a textural thing. It doesn't have to be a log, it could be a bit of fabric that's going in so that they have purchase to be able to climb out should they fall in,
Okay. Yeah.
or
Yeah. So something
plants.
like a little ladder, effectively. Yeah.
Yeah,
Of
little
sorts.
little ramp.
Yeah. A
Yeah,
little ramp. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
great
It
point.
makes sense. Yeah. So let's say we're going up to a bigger size now. We know we can create a wildlife pond in a small barrel or such, but it's going to be a limited range of of creatures that are going to come in there just because of the nature of it. So let's say we're creating the perfect wildlife pond in a garden,
Yeah.
and what would the minimum size that we would start with?
Oh, I think on average, 2 or 3 meters long is fine to attract. I mean, obviously, the bigger sort of not the bigger the better, but yeah, 2 3 meters would be if you had a small garden. Like that's quite adequate. That's
Yeah,
quite big, in fact,
yeah.
and achievable.
Yeah. So at 3 meters, then let's say we've 3 meters and it's, similar-ish width or whatever, and
Yeah.
we've created our layers and our zones. And I saw on your Instagram you were creating a garden in bloom. I think it was for Fingal. Was it for
Oh,
Fingal?
I grew the plants. I didn't
Grew,
make the
oh,
garden.
you
That
grew
was,
the plants.
yeah, and that was a suds garden. So that's another really important topic, actually, that now the county councils are using the suds. So basically the using of water from suburbia and urban areas to recycle into the land rather than it going into storm water.
Yeah, that's
So
another.
runoff.
That's another area we'll chat about that in a minute.
Yeah.
I actually beforehand I hadn't thought of that, but I was at a brilliant conference in the springtime there, and it was all about suds. So we might come back on that one in a second.
Yeah,
So
it's
let's
interesting.
yeah, it's brilliant, and there was some brilliant concepts there. But we'll come back to that one in a second. So on the plants then. So you
Yeah.
grew them. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that. So
So I'm growing my plants for my customers and I'm diversifying and trying to get as many species as possible. Even if they're tiny little minuscule little guys, I think they're all important. As we know, usually there is an insect or some sort of a creature involved specifically with the plant, and a
yeah,
lot of the time we just don't know. So for instance, I'll use the water dock, which you pretty much never see. I've never seen it in the wild. I'm starting to put that into ponds. Now, it does just look like a dock leaf, a giant dock leaf. I
hmm
think it's gorgeous. But we have an extinct insect called the large copper, which was a gorgeous butterfly. It's also extinct in the UK. But basically, because we've drained our lands and we've ruined the habitat that these giant docks grow in. And it's not that they can't grow the docks, they can, but there's something so complex going on there that nobody knows why the reintroductions didn't work. So I'm trying to grow a diverse range of species that, and they look unusual as well. Like there's another plant that you probably know, the devil's bit scabious.
beautiful.
Um, yeah, and the marsh fritillary butterfly is his favorite plant.
Yeah.
And they're also beautiful. So as many of those plants that I can grow and put into the ponds that I create, they don't just look unusual, but they could be doing something good that we don't even know, or they could also be a plant stock
hmm
for wild habitats when eventually, hopefully, we do a bit more re-wetting and there might be a bit more genetic diversity if the plants are in urban gardens.
Yeah.
And on farm gardens, like, wouldn't it be amazing if we, and I know we do have lots of farm ponds, but farm ponds, I think, will also be very important for sort of the respreading of these species that are in decline.
Yeah, and so the plants then that we're going to put into this pond. Let's start in the deep areas, and I know you're not going to talk about water lilies and things like that. So let's
Yeah, I
have
like
the.
water lilies,
Do
but
you?
our native, yeah, of course I put in water lilies. That's actually the only one that's not native that I put in. But I have the native, the yellow lily, but I haven't. I've only had the guts to put that into one pond because it can be invasive. It has to be a big pond, and you have to
Okay.
tell people this is native, this is massive. It could kind of go a bit wild. So that's why you would need to put a management plan in place to say, okay, you're getting this plant, it is native. This is potentially what it could do. The same with some of the reeds. Potentially, they might damage a liner. So you sort of have to hash out the pros and cons of things and the plants that you use,
Mm.
or the area that you're in and what you might be allowed to put in or not. So the deep water, I definitely would be putting in the lilies just because they're gorgeous, and I'm not a total purist. I'm still a gardener. um, so no, they are gorgeous. And then the bulrush, some people call it reed mace.
Yeah.
It would be sort of deep-ish water, and it's a bit of I call it my migratory plant. It always goes where it wants to go, not where I put it. So there's most pond plants will migrate. They just do what they want to do. So you put them in, you keep an eye on them, and they're putting their tendrils down, going, actually, I like this level a bit better. which is totally fine. And then you might even move them to there or repot them. And you shouldn't really have to repot. So if we're talking about small ponds where plants are in crates, they're not in the ground.
Yeah.
You should really get 3 years if you've potted up nicely and you have a decent specimen. Or what you can do sometimes is you can get a secateurs and you can cut away the edges that grow out. So there's another plant that I use that's debatable whether it's native or not. It's called sweet galingale, and it's in a lot of ponds. It's like looks like a kind of carex sedge thing. It's beautiful, flowing in the wind.
Okay.
And it's amazing for water quality. So it would be quite deep as well. And it has these beautiful fibrous roots that come out of the pot, and they're absorbing the nutrients. So you can get away with pruning back to the pot for a few years, and then you would need to lift and divide.
Okay.
And the same would go for most of the plants. The marsh marigold is a great plant. So it would be a little bit higher up, closer to the margin. And if you want to propagate from it, you basically dip the flower in the water and leave it attached to the plant, and it'll grow new little plantlet that you can cut off and plant.
Brilliant.
Um,
And then out into the outer zones. What are we planting out there?
Well, ironically, the outer zones are a funny one. So aesthetically, in nature, it would be that the big rushes would be your backdrop, but that doesn't really work. So the caltha would be one, or sorry, the marsh marigold would be one of them. The spearworts. I also have this lovely plant, and it's a bit of a tricky one, called tubular water dropwort, which is quite rare in the wild. And it has these massive tubular stems that sort of need support. So if you imagine a lake or a turlock in the wild, you'd have all these plants growing in conjunction with each other, and they all support each other, a bit like a wildflower meadow. You need sort of the bamboos that we would use, but they're other plants. So this plant grows tall, but he would be in the margins and has lovely umbellifer flowers that all the insects love. So I would grow them a lot, kind of dot them all alongside each other so that they prop each other up when they're in the wind. Because when you're walking towards a pond in a normal garden, you sort of don't want your view blocked, but at the same time, you have to put your plants where they're going to be happiest. The irises, of course, are great in that
Brilliant.
area too.
Yeah.
I do use the purple one, which isn't native, and obviously the yellow flag. But you want to keep an eye on the yellow flag because he can be a bruiser.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
They're beautiful. They're absolutely gorgeous flowers. Yeah.
yeah. And then the sedges and grasses, and I'm starting to grow these tiny little rushes. So there's one called jointed rush and bulbous rush, and they're only teeny tiny little. Now, depending on the soil, obviously they'll grow bigger if you give them more nutrients. But again, these little things dotted around, and water mosses, some of the hornworts. I just really like to mix it up. So usually people will block plant, which is more impressive. But having it evenly distributed, the little and the big, they all help each other, and they all have kind of a symbiotic relationship with each other. And I'm assuming the microbiome as well, and the creatures.
Yeah.
So
And in terms of time, then, so we've dug out our pond with the different layers, and we've done our planting now. It's going to take time, as you said, to build up this symbiotic relationship and for everything to come into balance. Does it
yeah.
take? I know you get some creatures coming in quite quickly, but how long is it before it starts to function fully?
I would say fairly quickly. Depends on how many plants you put in. So if you don't put enough plants in, you'll always be fighting an uphill battle with your water quality. So I nearly rather put in too many plants and be taking them out to reach that point more quickly. Like I put in a pond last midsummer, and it's growing out of its skin now, just because the client said put in whatever you want. And I added the logs, and I added the different layers, the different grades of pebble and sand, and as many plants as possible. And sort of within the week that it went in, I had insects arriving. And now it is a very nicely rewilded site, so they probably had loads to begin with.
Yeah.
But definitely within 1 year, you should see stuff should arrive. Like within, if you put in water and you've got frogs in your garden, they're going to be there instantly.
Yeah.
They're not going to ignore it, you know.
And what about if you don't have frogs? So you might start to pick up. I have in my head here the the thought of doing quite a big wildlife pond
Yeah,
at some point in the near future. Um, Years ago, when I was a child around here, frogs and toads were quite plentiful,
yeah.
and I haven't seen one in I don't know how long. I really don't know how long it is since I saw a frog.
Oh no.
Very luckily, yeah.
Okay.
Um, and there's probably a few factors at play there, most of which are outside of my control. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering if 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 I do put in, a big wildlife pond, how likely am I to get frogs? I know I can introduce them from up the road
Yeah.
or whatever, but
I would say you might be surprised, to be
okay,
honest. Like we don't see them. A lot of people say to me, it's only because I'm working with them that I see them all the time. But there are plenty of people that are out in nature that don't see them. They're designed to not be seen because you're technically a predator. So they might be there and you're not seeing them. But no, I think that if you left it, like obviously they spawn around Valentine's Day, that's the amplexus. So I would definitely wait and see what you get. Now, the other thing about building a very big pond is you're going to attract birds. And if you attract ducks, they have a great time with the spawn. And they're really specific and amazing that they'll eat the yolk out of the jelly. So you might come out one day and you feel like you've got acres of spawn, and by the next few days it's just turned into goo because you've had ducks arrive and they eat it. And there's another really interesting dynamic between frogs and newts. So I have some ponds that have both, and some ponds that have graduated from frogs to just newts. And the reason that is because the frogs come earlier and lay. As I said, it used to be Valentine's Day. Now, because of climate change, it can vary from January, right? It can go on for 2 months.
okay,
So they arrive first, but that doesn't mean that the newts aren't there. And the newts don't lay until around May, and they lay an individual egg wrapped in the foliage of subaquatic plants. So what happens is the frogs do their business. They go off about eating, getting fattening up after laying, and the newts come in and they fatten themselves up the same way the ducks do, and they eat the yolks. So sometimes in a small pond, you'll see this floating mass of frog spawn with no black dots, and that might be because you have newts.
wow,
So sometimes they can get rid of that population of frogs by preventing the self propagation of those frogs. So
wow.
it's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be building something that big that will attract ducks. That's yeah, no, that wouldn't be an issue. Like when I say big, um, on
Not
the big,
acres.
no, not acres, no, on the bigger end of a garden
Yeah.
wildlife pond.
I
Let's
think you'll be surprised. And if you're not surprised, then yeah, technically we're not supposed to move them, but I'm always saying to people, there's plenty of places that you can go to. I've been called out to many rescues where a pond is being got rid of. And in that case, obviously you're going to rescue the wildlife and
yeah,
rename
yeah,
it to somewhere else.
yeah.
And then once they have a handle on it, they're never leaving you. And
Yeah,
also I quite often rescue frog spawn from mountain, the gullies that quails have on either side of the
yeah,
roads. They quite often lay in them and then they dry out. So rescuing that spawn from drying out is not a bad thing in my opinion.
yeah. That's where I've seen a lot now, locally is in those gullies at the side of forestry lanes. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So you'd be doing a good thing by
yeah.
letting them be residents in your new pond.
Okay, so that's kind of the wildlife pond. Is there anything we've missed there for somebody that's looking to create one?
I think that the habitat beside the pond is important as well.
Okay,
So again, with the stone and logs are so important. So if you build a pond, if you want your frogs to stay over the winter or have a safe hidey place, piles of stones. Now, it doesn't have to be an ugly pile of stone like somebody dumped a barrel load of rocks in your garden, but that's also effective. But yeah, having layers of stone with little gaps in it is super important. Like if you, I on so many maintenance projects, or I do a lot of refurbishments. So somebody that's had a pond for 30 years and it's suddenly leaking and a loved one built it, and I try and rebuild it nearly exactly as they did. They quite often have rubble all around them, and it's alive with frogs and
Right.
cool insects. Like there's a really cool woodlouse that's pink, and he
Yeah.
specifically, yeah, he's really cool. I was reading up on him the other day. He specifically likes caves, and weirdly, they're found more in the Protestant churchyards than Catholic, because back in the day, the Protestants used a different type of mortar, apparently, which is more attractive to this little guy. It's on Wikipedia. You can look
Wow.
it up. So you'll get all those really cool things that, like, it might look like a nothing to you, but it's a home for somebody. And again, the hedgehog houses, bumblebee houses are really easy to make.
Yeah.
So within your pile of rocks, or you can make it nicely like a dry stone wall with some plants on it. You can get an upturned terracotta pot, a bit of hose out of where the
The
drainage hole
whole.
would
Yeah.
usually be, um, prop it up on some rocks and get a chicken wire ball, just make a little ball and stuff some dried grass into it. And have, oh no, I lie, sorry, the hose to go underneath the main opening and put a cap on the top, and just put that into your wall. And if they use it, they use it. But if it's not there, they can't
Hmm.
use it.
And so that's for that
Bumblebees,
bumblebees.
subterranean bumblebees, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Just I know we spoke about this the other day a little bit, but we'll delve into it slightly. Creating a proper bumblebee house, and I know, or habitat, and I know you don't like the word bumblebee hotel, as you will see, or bee hotel.
yeah.
Um, how what's the proper way of doing this, or what are the key
Um,
points? Because I know some of them that you'll see, the fancy ones in, that you can buy, they're
yeah.
not functional at all. They might look pretty and so on, but they're not functional. So function wise, what are the key things?
I think keep it simple. Like there's another thing you can do. It sounds gross, but hoverflies like to lay in kind of gooey disgustingness, in kind of forest ponds where there's decay. So you can just put a bucket in a shady place, put water in it. It sounds gross. A bit of soil, leaves, logs, and then top it up with sort of leaf litter, and they will lay in there. So that's one habitat, let's say. Then the minor bees, like a sandy area, whether that actually works or not, that you can create that habitat that they'd like, I don't know, but there's no harm in leaving some sand out. The leaf cutting bees are super easy. Just get a log, drill some holes in it. Has to be placed in a south facing area because they need that heat. Again, the bumblebee hut, like all the separate, I just don't feel myself that with the hotels that everybody is going to occupy it at the same time.
Yeah.
And they're freestanding. I imagine because they're freestanding, they probably get bombarded by the weather in winter and mightn't, like, animals and insects need cover. So leaving your leaves on the ground as a mulch, not cutting things back until as late as possible as you can leave it, because as you know yourself, for instance, we were talking about knapweed before. Within the heads of a lot of these flowers are overwintering insects. And not only are they overwintering, but the birds know they're overwintering. So the birds are going to come in and have their protein snack. So the more things I think that you can leave undisturbed, you're probably doing more that way than you are by buying one of these expensive houses that I think a lot of them have paint on them. Like, I don't know how that can be good. But yeah, leaving, or again, like a log on the ground. If you turn over a log, the cool ground beetles. So the ground beetles are really important as well. All of the insects together, just stone, wood, the leaf cutter bees, believe it or not, love roses, I think, the best, because they have that, again, if I was in the bee mentality, they have a lovely rigid feel to their leaves. So if you have a rose garden, maybe you should have a few logs with a few holes in it, if you
Yeah.
don't want, or if you don't mind holes cut in your leaves.
Yeah, it makes sense. And we spoke about it before. Ground beetles are brilliant for slugs, so for the
Yes.
control of slugs, like so. Yeah,
Yeah.
all of these things have a function. And as you say, we don't most of the time we don't understand everything that's happening there, or even to be honest, a large part of it. But
Yeah.
if you understand, it's a bit like soil health. You
Yes.
won't know everything that's going on down there, but by looking after the soil, by improving the soil, you know
Yeah.
that there's good things happening. And I suppose that's what the aim is.
Yeah. Exactly.
I've seen you as part of one of your ponds, you created a hedgehog house.
That's right. Yeah, that was in a beetle bank. So I love beetle banks because I think beetles are amazing. So don't forget that on your excavation you have all of this lovely soil,
Hmm.
and you might, depending on how deep your soil is, you'll have different. Um, the soil horizon could be include loads of really cool soil, because I love soil as well. Why wouldn't you if you're a gardener? And the hedgehog house. In the beetle bank, unfortunately, I used a lot of ash dieback, because I think what's happening with the ash dieback is, yes, it's a crop that we can harvest to burn, but then we're releasing the carbon. So if we think about that in the long term and try to use a lot of these trees for good to lock in the carbon, I'm now building beetle banks like a log wall, either facing in, sort of like a disc. I did it for a very big pond on a research farm, and then you backfill with soil. So you have the opportunity there to create all kinds of houses within that bank. So I created a long tunnel in for the hedgehog, because they like a long entrance, and they like to kind of go up the way, because if it's deeper than the original soil level of what you're constructing, it could get flooded or damp. So you kind of build up a ramp, put a gravelly sort of a bottom in it, and then cap it. And you can either put grass in, but to be honest, I think with most animals, they don't like what we choose for them, and I don't blame them. So if you are lucky enough to get a hedgehog, it'll do its own bedding. Now they do say that you can't have hedgehogs and badgers together. I don't fully believe that. They say, and it is true, that badgers will predate hedgehogs, but I don't know anyone lucky enough to have both of them in their garden. So yeah, the hedgehog house has to be sort of safe enough that no baddies can get in there and take the young. And I
Hmm.
think I built a stoat house as well. Like there's so much, we have the internet at our fingertips. When you're planning a pond, I would go do a deep dive on the internet on all of the different creatures that benefit from water, and see what little things that you can do to help those animals.
Hmm.
Because in your construction phase, you have that opportunity to put in all these extra little houses and use the native plants surrounding. Again, like the easiest plant to grow in disrupted soil would be foxgloves. You just throw the seed in and away it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then you can decide afterwards. You don't have to have a grand plan either. You can just do it as it comes along.
yeah, yeah, for sure. It's there's the world of I suppose there's loads of things we could still talk about on that, and my head is ticking away here. I'm even picturing as you were talking there, I'm picturing where I'm putting it, and
Yeah, go
I kind of I have the idea already. And when you were mentioning it, it'll be at the bottom of a slope, and that slope is actually a really shaly bank already. So I think
Yeah.
the
Well,
log
that's
wall on
another
it.
really important topic, is your soil. So, digging wise, that can be there, because of course there's different things that you can use. I haven't had the privilege yet of using bentonite, but according to your soil, you might be lucky enough to be able to dig a decent hole and it be a natural pond, in which case it has totally different management. But if you're using liners, so the shaly stuff, the sandy stuff, it can be really tricky to maintain the structure but you have to be so careful
Hmm.
because it just falls away. Whereas if you've got really deep clay, solid, like rock solid stuff, it's nearly like coating concrete,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I
so
should
yeah,
have, where I'm putting it, I should have both. So down the bottom part is going to be, there'll be a little bit of topsoil, and then it'll be a subsoil, which around here, because this is an old coal mining area, you
yeah,
have quite marly stuff. Now, it's not going to be good enough to hold water completely,
yeah,
but it certainly will be easy enough to shape once you get down a little bit. But then
yeah,
it's because it's, again, an old coal mining area, there's these kind of little banks of shale around the fields, and one of those banks is where this will go, and it is literally like shale. But I won't be digging there. It'll be down slightly further. I'll be digging for that. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, it sounds very similar to that pond that I was saying to you that I did about a year ago. They're the same. So they have this lovely marl at the bottom. It's a delight to dig.
mm,
And because it's like you're sculpting,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, it
yeah,
just comes away perfectly. Whereas the sandy stuff, oh, they're rocks poking out. And in that case, if you do have soil like that, you want to take extra precautions on how to protect your liner. Now, the DPM liners are amazing, as you know,
yeah,
but you probably in those situations would want to do sand underlay liner. And as you get bigger, you might want to use a geotextile on top. But yeah, it sounds like you'll have it's fun to do as well to make
yeah,
your shapes.
yeah, yeah. Should be. Just why did you say geotherm? So your
So for the
sand
really big,
geoliner, yeah.
yeah, so on this very big pond, I did the geotextile is this very thick black geotextile, and what it allows you to do is to put rocks in on top of it.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. Now I get you. Yeah,
yeah, and basically it's like, and it also wicks. So if you've got a massive area with a liner, and the surface area of the pond is quite
yeah.
big, and you get a hot day, you've got a lot of evaporation. So to prevent the liner from being damaged by a water drop that isn't being filled, the geotextile on top will have capillary action out to the sides,
Oh
which
yeah.
will marry into the. It just makes it a little bit more
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. No, makes sense now. I was wondering why that was for a second. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it makes
only
sense.
in big ponds.
Are you that big pond that we're talking about on the research farm? Are you allowed to talk about that, or
I don't know. So
okay?
yeah,
Well, we'll park it.
yeah,
It's a very big one, though, isn't it?
yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we won't say anything about that one. And then we mentioned it briefly earlier on in relation to suds, and just so people are aware, a lot of home gardeners won't be aware of what it is. Obviously, a lot of landscape architects and garden designers are very much aware of it now, and it's a way of essentially, in layman's terms, it's a way of slowing down water exiting your site or being captured on your site, essentially, and trying to slow it down initially is the big thing, and then trying to do something with that water that is slowed down. So, for example, if you have 10 downpipes off your house and your outbuildings, and wherever they go, that they're not just being rushed off the site, that they go through a sort of a catchment area, and that it breaks the flow so that they're not just flowing off down somewhere else. And they're trying to do that on a bigger scale, especially in urban areas, to slow down the exit of water,
Yeah,
essentially.
it's a great idea, and all the councils have taken it on board, and I think they have to actually.
Yeah,
And it makes huge sense because we have so many problems with certain cities and towns with floodwaters on rivers because essentially we've canalized a lot of waterways to suit ourselves, and we've eliminated the floodplains and all of the hard surfaces within urban areas it's all just going to stone water or storm water. So I try to encourage people to do, if they're changing their driveway, simple things like please get gravel instead of, uh, tarmac or concrete. Because it's a slower percolation, it's not just going straight out onto the road. Or again, you absolutely can use your downpipe to fill your pond, and have maybe a percolation area around the pond. Because don't forget that if your pond is filling from your roof, that you will also need an overflow
an
into your
overflow. Yeah,
garden, and that
yeah.
will need to be planted accordingly. And
Hmm.
but it's a great idea, and I hope it kind of gets a bit more promoted in the public eye,
Yeah.
because there's so many individuals that could just make a different decision that would help with it.
Yeah, and again, like this can be done. in home gardens as well. Examples of that were at this conference in the springtime. There was some brilliant examples, and I forget, it was from some town council in the UK, but essentially where they taught people how to capture water into some form of a tank, basically at the bottom of their downpipe. And they slowed it firstly by the water was coming down chains, which obviously looked good, sounded good. When it got there, there was a whole load of different layers, like you were talking about your layers in your pond. So there was 3 or 4 different depths within this tank, essentially. Now it was a beautiful tank. It wasn't just a water tank. It was painted up and it looked really good. It was planted, and then you had different layers in it. And then at the end, you had your overflow. So the water exited then, as it would, but in the meantime, it had been slowed down. It was feeding an ecosystem which had lots of different plants, lots of different insects. And yeah, it was just slowing the water down, and there was a habitat there as well.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. And they were
Yeah.
trying to replicate this. It was done on some of the town buildings, and they did demos on it, and then people were able to take that away on a
Yeah.
smaller scale and do it in their homes. So yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, I think in some of the big town plans now, don't they have designs for wetlands within the city to do exactly that on a bigger scale? So I
Mhm.
think they even have tanks in the ground, and they would have a wetland system where then, of course, the water is filtered. So
Yeah,
by the time it gets to the streams and the rivers, it's not full of all the stuff that we have in our atmosphere that's poisonous to all those aquatic animals and plants. So
yeah,
yeah, it's a really positive thing.
yeah. Tell us a little bit about your business. So obviously, your day to day, you mentioned that you're calling to these little old ladies that have their
Yeah, I
ponds,
love them.
but yeah. So
They're great. We have the chat.
there's Yeah. So you have all these ponds. So you're
Yeah,
doing maintenance in sort of
yeah,
older established ponds, revamps in some,
yeah.
creation of new ones. So just tell us about your kind of day to day, week to
Day to
week.
day. Well, yeah, so it's exactly that. So generally what I try to do in the winter months, I'm doing maintenance. Because I have a cut-off-ish time before Valentine's Day, and so many people ring me in January going, "Can you get to my pond? What about the frogs?" Because everybody knows that if they tell me that there's an animal endangered, I'll be there tomorrow. So I try to do the maintenance stuff over the winter months, because its construction is difficult enough in Ireland, in the ground, let alone being in December or January. And then, sort of from spring on, I would be doing construction on greenfield and reconstruction. And I'm growing my own plants for those ponds as much as I can. So that is part of it as well. And then going forward, I would also maintain those ponds. And then lots of times I would then build herbaceous slash wildflower beside that. So I do garden design as well, but not kind of conventional stuff. Like there'd have to be a few weeds in there. And I have a relationship with I have one client, you won't mind me saying, she comes out every time, and I built her a big waterfall for her. And there's this one persistent dandelion. And she comes out and she's like, "Actually, I'm watching you now. You have to take it out. I'm not leaving until you take it out." So that kind of thing. And people, I think, over the years get a bit more embracive of allowing things to grow. So that same lady, I did a bee garden for her. And this year, now to be fair, a tree was taken down, so it probably has more light. But I try to do what I said to you earlier. Please don't cut back anything until as late as you can, like the end of January, February, if you really have to.
Mhm.
And allow some of the weeds to grow, and do an annual weed maybe, or twice weed. But I just find that the plants grow amazingly together. And also another thing that I would try and encourage all of my pond and garden people to do is never leave the soil naked ever.
Mhm.
Because nature hates that. Nature hates the
Yeah.
void. So I'd be doing that as well. So I'll do maintenance, garden maintenance, well, adjacent pond garden maintenance for my clients as well. But just those ones. So I wouldn't be doing normal, like, grass cutting or that kind of thing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then with those clients, so if I put in a new pond, I would say that usually they don't need to see me back for maybe 3 years unless something goes drastically wrong.
Okay.
Another thing I'm starting to do now is with green water problems, I'm introducing Daphnia
Okay.
instead of any kind of, like, I'm really anti all chemicals, and I've had to fight a lot of people for years, but so there's, I'm sure you know about blanket weed.
Oh yeah.
Everybody hates blanket weed and
Yeah.
duckweed. So with blanket weed is an interesting one. So many people are tempted to use chemicals, and to be fair, they do work just in that period. But if you imagine you've got a body of water and you have this blanket weed that you hate, the reason that it's there is because there's nutrients to grow.
Imbalance.
It's meant to be there.
Yeah.
So if you remove it and you consistently remove it and you grow more plants, eventually you'll deplete the nutrient stock in the water and it won't have somewhere to go. However, if you kill it, what happens is it rots, it goes to the bottom, and the cycle is continuing. So you will forever have to kill it with that chemical. So even though it's a long sort of time frame to finally eliminating it or keeping it on a manageable level, you do have to put in the hard graft to remove it. And the best times to remove it, so it starts to really flourish in May. And it has this really annoying phase where when you touch it, it breaks apart and goes everywhere. It's really frustrating.
Hmm.
So you have to wait for it to be a bigger, thicker plant where it rises to the top and it kind of goes a limey green with bubbles in it.
Yeah.
And then you can easily stand in and wrap your hands around it like big clumps, and it's fantastic in the compost heap.
Hmm.
So use nature to your advantage. Don't fight anything unless it's a non-native thing. If it's a non-native, off with its head. But if it's a native, it's part of a cycle, and it's not your fault or anybody's fault. It's just something that you have to think your way around and manage it accordingly. That's my opinion, anyway.
Yeah,
Not
it's a very clever,
everybody.
it's a very clever way of looking at it because, as you say, if that blanket weed gets zapped, that decomposes on the bottom of the pond, and away your cycle goes again. So you don't solve the problem. You're constantly in a treatment phase, as opposed to a slightly more, as you said, a slightly slower approach, but a more balanced approach that gives you this full balance in time.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
remember that it's doing a job for you.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
it's
how
there
I
for a
see it.
reason.
It's like
Yeah.
blanket weed's not the enemy. It's actually taking nutrients out. And then you take those nutrients out, you put them in your compost heap, and you redistribute the nutrients somewhere else. Like it's
Mhm.
photosynthesis. It's availing of something that's there. So fighting it isn't, working with it, I think. Working with nature all the time proves better, I think, than spraying the bejesus out of everything.
Yeah, it's
But that's just my opinion.
yeah. So that's your kind of day-to-day stuff, creating, maintaining, building habitats,
And the plants.
and the plants to go with your ponds in gardens. Where can people find you? Where's the best place to get in contact with
Um,
you, or email address?
Unfortunately, I only have social media. I only have Instagram at the moment. I do mean to build a website, but like with everything, I'm a bit more sort of outside most of the time rather than inside. So
Hmm.
yeah, I bit the bullet and I did the social media thing. I think it was last year. Just because I knew that knowing me, that's all over the place the whole time, that the likelihood that I was going to sit down at a computer and do a website was low. So the social media has just been an easy out, and I know that not everybody is on social media. I do sort of word of mouth as well. Like I mainly work in Dublin, Wicklow, and Galway. But I mean, I can go further afield, but I think, and I do advisory on for people if they want to build their own with their own crew. So I can do a plan and a design with the different plants and elements and creatures that you want to attract. Or I've even started doing kind of hybrid swim pond, wildlife ponds now as well, with that design in mind, that it's a little bit more naturalistic. But
Okay.
I wouldn't be. I don't have my digger driving tickets just yet, so don't know
I
if I'd
know,
have time for that as well.
I noticed the just yet bit.
Yeah. I do like
Um,
diggers and tractors.
we have covered an episode on natural swimming pools as it happens, and it was an unusual episode for the podcast. It's not wasn't a typical one, but it was hugely popular actually, and continues to be
Yeah.
hugely popular. So
Oh, I think they're great.
yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
It was something that was in my head for this pond, and then I didn't realize you're just after sort of sparking something else in my mind now that they could be combined from a
Oh,
wildlife pond to.
totally. I
Oh
tried
yeah,
to convince somebody. The last pond that I completed was a lovely story. There's so many lovely stories to do with these ponds. So it was a lady who bought her father's house. Her father was incredible. So he was in the Orchid Society. He built his own pond, like the garden. He's just one of these incredible people who did everything. And this old koi pond, completely dilapidated, full of rushes. I think it was built maybe 30, 40 years ago. Plants from the burn, when you were allowed to do that, maybe. And when I finally had reconstructed the inside to allow for wildlife, because a koi pond is built quite differently to a wildlife
yeah.
pond because they need so much depth. I was looking at it going, God, are you sure you don't want to make this into a swim pond? She's like, no, actually, you can't make it into a swim pond. But it wasn't that big, and it absolutely you could have sat on that with your glass of wine, no problem. So they don't have to be massive. Like you don't actually have to be able to do lengths in them.
Okay, so
It sounds a
it's
bit
just a
mad.
dip.
Yeah, a little dip, a pond
So
dip.
how big would it need to be?
That one was only, was it 3 or 4 meters long? Now, to be fair, it was 1.5 meters deep, I think, because it was a koi
Yeah.
pond. So technically, you could sit on the edge of that and be pretty much submerged. And you could tread water if you tried really hard. But it was perfect for it. In fact, when I put it up, I think I have it on my social media. Somebody did comment that looks like a small swimming pool because it
Mm,
was just the shape of it. It had been built so hard-sided for the koi,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I then adapted it for the wildlife. But you could absolutely sit in that
Brilliant.
if you were so inclined. I would.
So I'll put the link to your Instagram in the show notes, but people can find you. It's Pond Girl Ashley
Yes.
on Instagram,
Yeah.
and yeah, if anyone is not on Instagram, just send me an email, and I'll get Ashley's permission to pass on her email address to you as well.
Yeah.
If you're inquiring about any ponds, so typically you're working in the Wicklow, Dublin area, and in the Galway area.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It's been a really interesting chat. My head is ticking away here in the background. It's there's lots that I want to do with water in the garden. Some, as I say, frogs used to see loads of them, don't anymore. That's something that I'd like to see back around the place. So yeah, I have plans anyway. So you're after answering a good few of my questions on those things. And yeah, thank you very, very much for coming on Master My Garden podcast.
Thank you. It's been lovely to talk to you, and hopefully, there's loads of more inspired people that are going to go out and make lovely habitats for all our lovely creatures.
Yeah, for sure. So that's been this week's episode. A huge thanks to Ashley for coming on. Really interesting chat. Yeah, I knew beforehand that this conversation would go in a good few different ways, and it did. And yeah, I forgot about suds, and that's really, really important as well. But the creation of a wildlife pond in your garden is hugely beneficial. We've spoke about it on the podcast on numerous occasions before. And as Ashley mentioned, that can be anything from a small little barrel right up to a fully fledged wildlife pond. Just bearing in mind, the principles and the ideas that Ashley mentioned, creating these different zones that are suitable for all these different creatures that will come. So as the saying goes, you build it and they'll come. But if you follow the principles that you mentioned, you're pretty sure of success with it. And yeah, loads of great information there. If anyone has any questions or wants to get in touch with Ashley around any projects or upcoming projects, and you're not on social media, just send me a message and I'll get in touch with Ashley. And that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, happy gardening.